Hi, this is Simon. Welcome to my lesson on timber classification. Today I'd like you to know the types of classification that we have, get you to be able to identify materials from these classifications, understand the simple formats of the characteristics of these timbers, and also to add to your repertoire of names on timbers. There are three types of timber classification. Let's have a look at hardwoods today. And the other one, yeah, you've guessed it, softwoods. But there's also a third one called manufactured boards. But I'll deal with that in the next video. There's a number of ways that we can see this classification in the trees. Let's start off with shape. A hardwood tree has a shape which, as you can see here, as a main trunk, which then branches off into main branches coming up the tree, and then those will branch off again and again and again to get this really big canopy of leaves that we have. While a softwood tree has a main trunk which runs from top to bottom, and then its branches are coming off from the trunk itself, and then you get this very famous looking Christmas tree look. So shape is something definitely to look out for when you're trying to decide. Another thing that is a visual clue that softwoods have needles. Now you know that needles will stay on the tree all year round. I mean, if you've ever had a Christmas tree, fair enough, they fall off in your house because of the temperature. But the needles will fall off over a 2-year period. So we say that they are evergreen trees or conifers. Whereas on the hardwoods, they have leaves, and these leaves will fall off in the winter. So in winter, you'll be able to see all the hardwood trees with their bare branches. And we know that these are called deciduous trees. Deciduous trees. And they lose their leaves in winter. Another visual clue that you'll get with the classification is how the tree reproduces. And here we've got a seed which is from the hardwood tree, and you will find that it is in a protective layer. So these fall off the tree, they're protected, and then eventually these will open up. This is a horse chestnut, and you may have played conkers with these before. In a softwood tree, we find that we've got a cone, but the seeds are inside the cone and they're unprotected. And when the wind blows, the seeds will fall out and they will drop onto the floor in this unprotected state. Let's have a look at the characteristics then of hardwoods. They are slow growing, and it will take around about 60 years or more for you to be able to get a decent piece of timber from a hardwood tree. Because it's slow growing, it has dense grain, and this makes it a very hard wood to cut and quite durable. But this is a little bit of misconception about why it's called a hardwood, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The slow growth gives it an attractive grain, and there's lots of varieties in the woods with the grain, much more than you find on softwoods. Softwoods are faster growing. They will probably take about 20 to 30 years before you can use them as timber. This makes the grain less dense and easier to cut, which again causes us some problems with this classification. It's attractive, but it has less variety of grain. So if you've seen one pine, you've probably seen them all. Let's see if you have heard of some of these hardwood names. Let's try oak. That's a very famous one. We've got ash. How about beech? Look how that is spelt, double E. And also mahogany. mahogany. How about these softwood names? Pine. I mean, pine's a very general name for these conifer trees. We've got Douglas fir. Always reminds me of Scotland, Douglas. And another Scottish name is Bruce, which always reminds me of spruce, which is another softwood. We've got larch and also cedar. Now, I've got 5 softwood names, and I'd like to give you 5 hardwood names. So I'm going to give you another one now, which is balsa. Now, that might surprise some of you who've used balsa wood before. Some of you may have used it to make a balsa wood plane. Here we come, plane coming in. Way. Balsa is very lightweight, and you can use it to make a plane, but it'll also break very easily. You can snap it with your fingers. So you've got to ask, well, why is it in the hardwood section? Well, can I just remind you that it's not really the word hard which is defining these categories. It's the idea that it's from a deciduous tree, and a balsa wood tree is a deciduous tree. To give you another comparison, I've worked with a wood called yellow pine. So just like lots of the hardwoods, this yellow pine can be quite difficult to saw through, and it's very hard to work with. So why is it in the softwood area? Well, again, you've got to remember that this is from a coniferous tree, from an evergreen tree, and therefore it is a softwood. I've popped some materials on here for you to look at, some timbers, and these are the hardwoods. This is oak. You can see it's got a very strong grain, very beautiful grain running down its length here. This is how the cells of the tree have grown. This one is ash, and again you can see it's got a very definite grain look to it and a lovely colour. This one is beech. It's slightly pinky in colour, but I can tell it's beech as well because of all these little flecks that you get within the wood. And again, you can still see this patterning on the surface. This is mahogany, and it's a lovely red colour. Like a lot of the tropical hardwoods, you'll find that these are very colourful and very sought after. And again, you can see it's got a very distinctive wood grain in its surface. And this is the rather boring balsa after that. This is the balsa wood, which is very light and easy to break. Over here, we've got just a general picture of pine. You can see it does have a distinctive grain, but it also has quite a lot of knots in it. This is where the branches have grown out from the tree. And you can see all these pines are generally the same sort of colour. This one is Douglas fir. And again, it's got, changes in its grain structure, which make it interesting. There we go, like so. This one is spruce. And again, you've got that sort of piney look to it. These lines of grains coming down and a couple of knots as well. This one is larch, getting a little bit more interesting now in the look of the grain with these different bands of width of grain on its surface. And then finally here, the cedar, which is another softwood. Now let me make a little space down here. I want to just add in here a little note about tropical hardwoods, because as it says in its name, these come from very hot areas where there is no winter. So their leaves are not going to fall off in the winter time. So they keep their leaves all the year round. But again, they're still deciduous trees and hardwoods, but it's just that we call them a tropical hardwood, and mahogany and balsa fall into that area. And finally, because these hardwoods are slow grown with a dense grain and therefore very attractive, they have more of an intrinsic value and therefore they're going to cost a pretty penny. Where the softwoods are faster growing, less dense, and they're sort of more economical to buy. I wouldn't call them cheap because that sort of lessens the value of this wood, and it's still a good wood to use. So I would say more economical. And don't forget the final classification, which is manufactured boards, and we'll deal with that in the next video.